At the end of this life that I've been given, after the prayers and the bells are rung, I ain't afraid of where I'm going and what'll become of the songs I've sung. What'll become of the songs I've sung.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Corpus Christi Songwriter Podcast. I'm Jules.
I'm Jimmy.
And Garrett is out for this episode. Poor dude is sick right now. We're all wishing him better. Everybody, get well, Garrett.
Garrett.
Get well, Garrett. All right. We got a couple songwriters coming up, and I'm really excited about today's episode. I've been looking forward to this one on the calendar.
I know.
Yeah, man.
Before we get into that, have you any like songwriting news yourself? Have you written anything? Are you working on anything?
Man, so Michael and Libby are doing an album.
That's duets. Michael O'Connor and Libby Cook.
Yeah, Michael and Libby are doing an album of duets, my understanding, and I pitched them a few songs that I did not have recorded at all, and I didn't know when they wanted those songs, but Michael sent me a message, and he caught me with like my desk disassembled and my pedal board not really in up to fully functioning status, and so I had to wait a little while before I could record some demos, but there are 3 songs that I was just giving them songs I hadn't even cut demos to. So I had to do some work on that stuff. And in the process of looking for songs from Michael and Libby, I stumbled across this kind of almost finished but not quite finished song called Room 515. And I just posted those lyrics on Facebook recently. It's what I do whenever I finish a song. I just kind of post a screenshot of the lyrics as they come to me, as it's completed. And yeah, so I don't know. I wrote that song and I was just happy to discover it. And I'm really looking forward to trying to record that now that the desk is put back together and and the pedal board is now reassembled and things are good. So
like a Room 515.
Yeah. Nice. It's about that's a twist on it. It's like here in ICU, Room 515. It's a song about like, someone dying, but letting old grudges die along with that. And because there's some topical stuff that comes up, in some of the material that I'm writing towards another project, and I want to self-produce that with a lot of really like personal songs, and So that song, that song really was about like just it's weird how like death comes around and you don't really think about death until death is like imminent, and then it puts a lot of things in perspective. But you can really, how do you get to that perspective without that encounter is kind of a question that a lot of philosophers have tried to grapple with, so it's kind of weird to like, I don't know, someone's dying and you're thinking of songs. I mean, it's a little rude. Maybe, No,
man. No, I come from it from a place as a songwriter as well, but also as a filmmaker. And this happens to me more as my filmmaker lens, if you will. I can be having one of the most profound moments of my life, and the most overwhelming thought as it's happening is, this would make a good movie. Or this would make a good scene. And it's a terrible thought, but it happens. It's a natural thing. So it's the same thing. Like, I'm going to use this in a song later, and it's who we are, right? That's who we are as artists, as storytellers, in one way or the other. You're a storyteller as songwriter, poet. I'm filmmaker, writer, songwriter. I can't decide what I am, but in all of that combined, we come from it, a place of truth, if you will, right? So
it's some writers have a deep well that they go into to generate their material, and some writers read and get their material from books, and some writers do kind of some of those things, but we should be careful not to ignore like the well getting deeper as we get older,
Oh yeah.
And I tend to admire someone like a John Hyatt, who, he wrote an album recently called The Terms of My Surrender. And I thought that was, one, a killer title. But two, he was kind of writing about getting older and about how, like, okay, like, these are the terms of my surrender, like talking about his heart to his long-term partner at that point. And so, but that the well gets deeper through your life experiences as they get more significant and carry more weight with the years that go by. That how one tends to draw that out as a songwriter is always particularly interesting to me.
Oh yeah.
So,
and both of our guests on this show this week, whenever you're listening to this, they do that really well, both of them, and they draw on their honesty. We touch on politics, and it's just both of these conversations, were just insanely eye-opening to me.
Yeah, talking with our first guest with Nathan, man, I was really looking forward to his conversation because he's just really poetic with the way that he illustrates with his lyrics, the way that, like, I can almost see like a background scene when I listen to some of his songs, and there's not really any overt mentions of anything going on. It's just, certain life things happening that are illuminating in his lyrics that he sings about that really speak to me, man. And but what I was not really prepared for that second conversation we had.
Yeah. With Sarah, the urgency by which she's I guess compelled to tell us her truth, her honesty. And for me, it's I don't know how to explain it. Like in the middle of this interview, I couldn't bring words to my brain just because the conversation or the words she was saying just hit me really hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it takes a perspective like that to sort of recenter your focus sometimes, and it's easy to get lost in just our everyday things that, like, it really is just the perspective of the capital O, big O, other, that can sometimes reorient the way you look at the world. And and I really admire artists that can, like, present a whole other perspective towards things you never saw or things you never considered. Yeah. And I think her stuff is really good at bringing you to attention to things you otherwise may not notice. But yeah, both these conversations were really cool. I for some reason I thought this would be like a lighter episode, but there's like real conversations of substance going on.
Oh yeah.
Right as we get into it with Nathan too, and it just gets thicker as we get to Sarah. So I'm excited for listener feedback on this episode, honestly.
For sure. Let's dive in. Our first guest is Nathan Evans Fox.
'Cause the light's gonna flicker on whatever shines, whatever your final destination out there tonight. There ain't nothing that stays there, so you're haunted or possessed, and I ain't gonna freak you.
As described by Americana Highways, his music is not cornpone, it's not alt country, country western, or pop country. He has a solid hold on a serious genre of country seldom covered by many artists. It cuts through the commerciality of country music. Our first guest is Nathan Evans Fox. How are you doing?
I'm good. Glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. It was last year you were one of our 5 finalists to be accepted into the 2024 festival. And you weren't able to make it, unfortunately. But then we caught your set at last year's Swarfa, and that solidified that we basically, you weren't able to say no. You're going to have to play the 2025 Corpus Christi Songwriters Festival.
Nice.
So, as the quote says, your music cuts through. It cut through to me, and like I said, there was no no's. And I just want to know, for any listeners, aka my cousin Derrick, who may not have heard your music yet, who is Nathan Evans Fox?
Shoot, I don't know. I think I'm just kind of I'm kind of nothing. I'm just like a mutt,
Ooh, I like that.
I think I think that's the thing that's tough. I don't think that I necessarily have anything like big to sell about myself. I just think that there's a lot of poetry and a lot to say by just digging into your life. There's a lot of poetics in anything if you dig into it enough and you are willing to stare at it enough. And frankly, also if you're willing to think through the relationships to people that all this stuff in your life pulls out. That's why a lot of my songs are about like grief and politics and just like working through family history and stuff like that. Yeah, I guess I don't, if the other thing I guess is I don't really think I got many songs about love that are like sappy and fun. I don't have a lot of like distracting romance songs. I do have songs about romantic love, but I think like our very intimate relationships pull out a lot that's more interesting than like I have feelings or I don't. I think they pull out a lot of interesting parts of our history, our place in the world, our relationship to life and death, all of that. So I don't know. I just try to dig into the things that I know.
There you go. I like that. Dig into the things you know. Jules, ask him my first question real quick.
So I think it took me a long time, dude, longer than I'd like to admit for different various reasons during my lived experience. But I came to sort of find that there was a particular way that I wanted to execute speaking towards politics within music. And I think that like, I think in certain ways, maybe having a crystal-eyed, clear view of your politics is probably the most helpful thing when it comes to deciding what to write. So I'm curious about like, what part of your journey or what did you experience in your journey that led you to kind of take the ideological worldviews you have, I suppose, and what was it like trying to place that into music or figure out a recipe towards, doing that?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of places that I can point my politics to. I mean, I'm from rural Western North Carolina. My hometown got wrecked by the recession, truly, truly wrecked. I come from very working class folks back on family land. The things that wrecked our family in our deep internal family systems were the ways that we paid the cost for war and for work. And so, that's a starting point in kind of just like lived experience and organic experience. When I think about what it means to work through, I hate to use this term because it gets bandied around and people get precious about it. But when I think about what it means to work through genuine generational trauma, you got to exercise the demons of empire. Like that's what that was for me. Because those things aren't just ideas. They're things that we carry in our bodies. And then I've also been very fortunate to just have a lot of people who are willing to tell me no and I'm wrong. And I'm never too smart to think I'm that smart. So I guess I've been fortunate enough to just know like, yeah, I should probably shut up and listen and just try on what people are saying for a minute and see if it works. The other thing for me is that I am trained in supporting people in grief and loss. And so, with that as a kind of professional background, when you start to see enough people go through genuine suffering, you realize that there's not anything that death touches and that loss touches where there isn't a kind of politic there as well. Whether that's because people got to pay for an ambulance ride and they can't afford it, whether people got to pay for a funeral, whether that's the fact that war and work also took away their life, whether quickly or slowly, whatever the course of their lifetime or not. When I think about what it means to make kind of to have a sense of politics in your art, I'm really against the like beat you on the nose with politics thing. We all can go read that elsewhere. We all can go like I can wear a shirt that says my politics. But I think what's interesting in playing music is giving you a felt sense of what it means to like say, I encounter the world with this lens and this set of commitments and practices. And when I practice these things, this is what it feels like. This is what it feels like to be in love with your partner. And to have a certain sense of like what a good gender politic is, and not in a way that's like performative, but in a way that's like really trying to work through it, in a way that says like, this is how I do the work of being someone who is in love. This is how I do the work of being someone who's like writing songs about trucks, like whatever it is. And so to me, I never want to be like, I don't want to be like just basically writing political signs and then just finding an interesting way to chant them at you. I want to make people kind of feel the kind of the affective space that our commitments open up. To me, that's more interesting. The kind of tricky side with that is that sometimes you get people who just can't really follow the thread, and so then they start being like, well, it's all open to interpretation. I'm like, sure, and so then I kind of have to do some clarification. Like, if you like this song, you're probably in love with something you didn't know you were. That's also a fun conversation to have.
So yeah. I run away for a second, and you asked the politics question already. What?
Well, I just, man, I should have prefaced it with a bit of like saying how much I admire, your work, man, and in the sense that like it seems to flow downhill from compassion, and there's a certain, from a person who tries to write from a compassion centered perspective, I don't even know what you'd call it. That's like the vaguest thing in the world, I suppose, right? But when your politics flows downhill from compassion, like when each according to their ability, to each according to their needs, sort of thing, right? It tends to, from an author's point of view or from a songwriter's point of view, it offers you so much more tenderness to document. So many more feelings that you can put into words now and understand that, like, it seems like you're just coming up with brand new sentences sometimes, like words that have just not really been placed together in such a way to say such a thing. But I admire your stuff because it's like you just feel the emotion behind it, and your TikTok presence as well, the way that, like, it seems like in the same way that your songs offer up a sort of a visceral sort of compassion, you can talk in such a way that like kind of speaks to the heart and explains some things logically, and it's really cool watching what you do on TikTok and seeing that with your music and stuff, brother. Just a lot of love and admiration coming this way to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I mean, if I could just riff on that even a little bit more, I think about there's a Steve Earle quote, and I think a lot of people might say this too. I don't know, but I heard it first from Steve Earle. Yeah. He could have been the first to say it. But that what a song offers is empathy. And I think, frankly, as someone who is trained in offering empathy, I think that's something that we all should get to, but I don't think that's ever honestly enough. Empathy at some point just lacks a certain amount of teeth, and it lacks a kind of bit of like, this is where I am in the world. And I think, where you invest your empathy, that's solidarity. Like the people that you invest, we only got so much room for feeling before we get burned out and before we're just beyond our capacities for understanding and relating to people and communicate with people and just riding with them. And I think that where you invest your empathy is that's just what we call solidarity. And so I think, there's like a very hard-nosed way of like chanting solidarity, but I think in a lot of like art, especially, I'm just like a kind of tender-hearted dude anyway. And so I think like understanding that for me, solidarity looks like saying like, these are the people that I will return to like imagine with, and this is like the community in the world that I want to embrace and like nourish with my love and my imagination, and that I want to make feel real and make like I just want to water these seeds a little bit in your brain and in your heart through these songs, and that's what solidarity is for me in a way. It's like saying like I'm riding with like my okra and my tomatoes and my corn. And, if you're a leek person, great. But like, this is what I have the room to grow in my garden. This is what I have the room to kind of care for and enjoy. And then you get me out in the okra patch and I'll talk about that for 4 hours. Like, so that's what solidarity, which is like a very, like, can be very hard nosed. That's what that looks like to me in like a very personal, intimate setting, like when I'm playing songs and writing them and stuff.
Yeah. I love that. Do you mind if I ask what got you into being trained to handle grief and speak to people about grief?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I grew up a religious fundamentalist. So, people that aren't, that in one way or another aren't like to their core scared of loss and trauma, in ways that like they stick in the room when those things happen, normally have enough of it in their personal life that they've been exposed to and they've had people help them walk through it in a way. Right. And so there's kind of like some family history there and some personal history there. And then there's also just the fact that, like, when you grow up a religious fundamentalist, you're exposed to some things, frankly, that are cool because you have you start from a kind of, and nothing in the world is taken for granted. But you also, frankly, have a lot that you have to lose and have to get over and have to reevaluate about, like, whether life is meaningful at all. Because you have to shed worlds, like the worlds that you've imagined, the worlds that you used to make sense of things, the worlds of friends and connections that you thought would be there for you, the ways that you make sense of the hardest things in life. Yeah. And so just those kinds of questions mixed with kind of family history and all of that, that kind of got me into that.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
So how has that, I mean, you kind of touched on it earlier on, but how has that informed you as a songwriter going forward? Did it change your process at all?
It did. Yeah. I mean, once you become once you're kind of grief maxing, you get a little grief pilled, you start to see grief in everything. There's kind of loss in everything. And you start to see the ways that grief, as you're working through it or it's unresolved, is echoed in all the things that you're working through in life or that you're avoiding in life. So there's that kind of part where it's just like, it's a lens that I now have for everything and I can't ever turn that off. And at the same time, I also just, like, I think part of the ethic I have in a song is I want it to do some work. Or rather, like, I want it to do work or I want it to give you a chance to play. But, like, I don't want to waste your time. Like, you need work or you need rest. And I think a lot of the work that I'm good at and a lot of the work that I think a lot of people need from songs is the work of in one way or another, grieving. That can be people, but that can also be friendships, that can be notions of themselves. And the grief isn't always just kind of loss centered, but it's also starting to, like, the kind of last phase of grief isn't kind of moving beyond pain, but it's moving towards new connections and a new sense of the world, that, like, after all of your kind of the fabric of your world has been kind of ruptured, that there's a new way of kind of stitching it together. Right. And so sometimes that's also the fun of music, is inviting people into kind of whatever a meaningful world could be, no matter how odd it is and no matter how kind of like squirrely it is.
Yeah. And does that touch into your latest single, Call Me Friend?
Yeah.
Tell me about that, because I feel like there's a connection there.
Yeah. Funny enough, so that single, so I recorded a record, which we've got in the can and we're shopping it around right now. But I recorded a record back in September, and I was just, honestly, I was trying to clear up some space on like my private SoundCloud thing where I'll just kind of dump like tracks and stuff I've done. And that song had no personal connection to me. I wrote it because I was in a like write a song a week songwriter group, and I just wanted to write something in that style that was also kind of like fraternal, like kind of just like, yeah, I'm your friend, and I got your back. And I didn't think much of it. I thought of it as a writing exercise. And it's, sometimes you write songs and it all comes just straight from the heart. And sometimes you got to write it out line by line and just trust that your habits that you've built are also a strong representation of like what you want to say. You're just getting them out in a different way. But I listened to it, and honestly, it's been a long year and a half for me in my personal life. And the thing that I love about that song is, it's not as bad as I remembered it, which was always a treat. But also it's saying, call me friend, basically the idea is like, when life just sucks, call me. And it's interesting to hear me from probably, I think I wrote a song 2020, 2021, sing that, because it felt like it was kind of former me in a way talking to me now. And so it was interesting for me to experience and be like, in a weird way, like I have been a friend to myself through this. And that was like kind of touching to just in a kind of year that feels like so much has kind of changed for me. And there's been seasons of there's been a lot of loss. To know that, in a time when I feel like sometimes I'm so disoriented about who I am because I'm just trying to put out the next fire, to realize that there's something that's consistent in me over the years that like is talking to me now. That's great. It's a gift. Now, it might all be sentimentality and nonsense, but sometimes that's what you need. And if it gets me through for a little bit, I ain't mad at that either.
No, definitely not. You brought up your habits. Can you walk us through a little bit your writing habits? What does that look like?
Yeah. Lord, I am terrified to co-write with people because because I think the biggest thing for me is that I think the gift of kind of poetic space is that you have so little of it. And so you have to make everything as kind of muscular as possible. And so you look for filler words and filler ideas and try to get rid of the things that are there just to kind of get you from A to C. You get rid of the B line and see if there's a way to say A and say C that implies the B. It's a lot of like kind of ruthless editing. Part of it also is just kind of also probing like what I really feel like I got to get off my chest. And sometimes that's just like, I need to have fun and say stupid stuff. I do have songs about trucks. I have songs about sexually active tractors. Like that stuff's really fun to me. But sometimes it's just also not that. I try to show up to write for at least for myself really regularly, and just be open to whatever comes. I also believe in killing your darlings. Like I'm going to have a lot of ideas. I'm going to have I got a lot of lines that I like that aren't ever going to see a song. I got a lot of lines that I like, that I've put in songs now that I'm putting out that aren't kind of in the song where they started. And so part of that is, I think you got to trust that even your waste isn't trash. It's compost. Like you can put it on the compost heap. Trust yourself. Don't beat yourself up for it. It's okay to like really, really kill your darlings because they're not actually dying. They're just kind of metabolizing. And so just kind of staying with it and keeping the compost stinky and fresh, I think is the goal.
So you and we met the first time in person at Swerfa back in September, and it was like the last like round of the night. And man, like I've never been in a round and felt someone's songs like hit me in the chest the way yours did, man. They were great, man. And so I'm wondering, like, because I have gone and listened to your stuff, but I don't seem to recall any of the songs that you played at that round. And there's another song that you do that I think I heard on your TikTok stuff, man, about something about like, it's the lyrics I remember, something about like you had a job, I didn't hire you back, and the joke's on them because I got good at being a dad. Like you just, so I'm wondering, like, what are those songs that you played? Are they available? Are they out there? Are they stuff you're planning on cutting on another album coming up or something? And be like, how much of your stuff is lived experience that you write versus like maybe stuff that you take more of an imaginative sort of, maybe putting yourself in the shoes of somebody else, of a character or something like that.
So it's hard to say because I tend to write. So I guess I tend to like a lot of the songs are probably out. So just the first part of the question, a lot of the songs are probably out. But I kind of, for my set when I'm not playing with the band, because I love playing with the band because we can get rowdy. And then when we bring it low, we really bring it low. Mm-hmm. But most of them are out. The set that I kind of play when I'm acoustic and solo, though, tends to be like really cold from a lot of different kind of spots in my kind of journey as a musician. And I also do, I have songs that song that you referenced with those lyrics. That's brand new.
Beautiful.
That's something that I got to figure out what I want to do with it. Yeah, that one got a lot of good traction on Instagram, which kind of shocked me. Because I write, I'm not saying this in like a look at me. I write a lot of songs that are like, here's some facts in my life. And so I just kind of threw that one up and it took, which was great to hear. But also, I have that record in the can that like we're kind of shopping as well. And so there's a lot of stuff that folks haven't heard that I have been playing out for a couple of years. If anybody knows anybody high up with lots of money, let me know. Yeah, I mean, I really do have a hard time being anyone else in my songs. I have no problem with kind of telling a little fib here and there, because I do believe in kind of like myth, like the point is to just tell something that feels true, that conveys a kind of truth that's more than the documentary fact. I think, I part of the thing is just like a personal thing. Like I can't, because I write from like where I'm at affectively, like I have to have some real emotional and intellectual data to draw from. And that doesn't mean that I can't write songs about things, but I can't write songs as other characters. That's really tough for me. The other thing is there's a part of me, and I'm sure there's so many people that do it well that like I'm just forgetting about. There's a part of me that really struggles with writing as anyone else, because so quickly it becomes just like, it feels weird to use I statements about someone else's experience, especially when you kind of do political songs and things like that. Pretty quickly that gets into kind of like trauma porn, or like this kind of like voyeurism of like other people's pain. You don't give an account of their resilience, or you only give this hopeful and glib kind of optimistic spin on things. And I can't do it. I feel like it's tricky territory to do it well, because you're always kind of approximating someone else, or you're just trying to be someone else. And I do kind of value just being on. I think I also just put on all that aside, I put a premium on being honest. Like I do want to show folks that like I think there's enough to be said from where you're at. Yeah, I can only write from lived experience, more or less.
Yeah. I'd be remiss if I let pass that he uses the word affect like you do, Jules.
He does, yeah.
But too, to bounce off that, your song "Freak Me Out."
Yeah.
So where did that come from? Because you use a whole bunch of horror movies to jump off of that. Also, Garrett, who is our other co-host, who couldn't be here because he has COVID. He is the biggest horror movie fan that I know, so he wanted to ask you this question, but so I'm doing it instead. Tell me about "Freak Me Out." Where did that come from, and how does that connect to everything you just said before?
So that song is, so there's still, like I think I sound probably like just a feelingsy Enneagram 4 type. I also just like the craft of writing. Like, so that song's kind of like a real both and on that, where it's like, I was really going through a moment. We had just had our kid. I was on paternity leave. And also the backstory is I don't do horror movies. I just genuinely do not enjoy being scared. I am baseline normally scared anyway. I don't need more of that. I like, I've also seen enough things in life that I'm not like, I need to tap in this recreationally. I'm like, no, I want to come home and watch Arthur reruns. I want the lightest fare TV. I don't want to think about much. I don't want to feel much. I'm good. I'm maxed out. But for some reason, when we came home with our kid, I was craving, like insatiably craving horror movies. And so, and I couldn't figure it out. And so I think what I realized though is that like, this little like, worm / chicken nugget that's moving its fingers around real strange and is like scared by everything is scary. The light flicks on. It's the first time that she's ever seen a light flick on. We had a healthy pregnancy, so like it's the first time she ever had to get food that wasn't just kind of automatically given to her, and so she had to scream for it. Like life's a freak show in that way, and everything is kind of the entire experience of just being here, and even things that we find enjoyable and comforting now was kind of a jump scare to her. And so it was really just like heavy to feel kind of just in this upside down world where like, I have to comfort you and guide you through this thing that is horrifying to you right now. And I think that's probably where the craving for horror movies came from, because I just felt so like attuned to just the strangeness of being here, and of being like scared in a way that has its beauty and its poetry, in the way that a horror movie has its beauty and its poetry, and it is worth watching, and also it's there to scare you. And so I wrote that song, and every line has a reference to a horror movie trope, a horror movie something like that. But they're also kind of telling stories about, like a lot about what it means to have a kid and be really thoughtful about what I'm going to pass on. Like, the chorus, a lot of people don't understand the chorus, but it was the bridge, but it was my favorite line. I check the back seat before I drive home. Because there's a kind of, there's the trope of like, you look in the mirror and there's the man in the rear view mirror that's, been in the car the whole time. But also I think about, what it means to come home from somewhere else and to be thoughtful about like the ghosts that you didn't know were still with you. And are you going to like bring them home? Are you going to park them in your driveway and bring them into the house where like you've promised to kind of like be a person who's going to be really thoughtful about what you model for your kid and what kind of experience of the world you open up for them and the things that are going to be their kind of like emotional and social inheritance. So it's like all kind of following that theme and also trying to be like, hey, you're the main character of this movie. I'm just not going to freak you out. You're going to get freaked out enough. So yeah, that song was a real trip to write. It sounds so sleep deprived.
It sounds like it, but it's legitimately one of my favorite songs of your new stuff that came out. So I'm excited for this new record.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jules, I have a couple more questions. Do you have anything? Because we're running out of time with them.
No, dude, ask your questions, man.
Okay. The main one that I kind of wanted to bring up was out of everything that you've learned over the past, when did you start writing songs first?
Oh, I don't know, like 7th grade.
7th grade? Puberty. Nice.
Yeah.
Was it on guitar or?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
So since then until now, what's the biggest lesson you've learned that could have been from somebody that imparted wisdom your way or just yourself? What in your process of songwriting, what's the biggest lesson you've learned?
Lyrics matter. I don't know. I had a big turning point where I was like, lyrics don't matter, because I was coming up out of fundamentalist worship bands. So lyrics didn't matter. It was all feel and vibe. The point was to get like really worked up. And then I hit a point where I was like, I think I just need to say things, and not feel like I got to put my body through like a holy punk show, to like do the work of a song. I gotta create a song that like people have to sit with.
So you came from this realm of a songwriter to where, it was music first, I'm guessing, at that point.
Yeah.
And then is it lyric first now, or you still find the melody first?
It's kind of both. But the point is to always make sure the lyrics are sharp, even if they're not like read like a treatise, but it's to make sure that like the lyrics are still really conveying something, even if it is just the feel of the song. Yeah. But no like unintentionally stupid lyrics.
There you go. And then lastly, last season, when we did this, not everybody, but most people brought up books that they were reading. Just randomly, it came up that people were these avid readers, and that led to them being better songwriters. So are you a reader? And if so, what are you reading right now?
Yeah, you heard me talk about politics. We all be reading theory. Currently, like a dummy, I am leading a Das Kapital reading group. So we're doing that. Yeah, I think you saw me post about that. I'm doing that, which also means that
you're speaking Jules's language right now. Just saying.
So I read plenty of Marx, but I never did a big one. So I'm doing that and reading the David Harvey Companion, and I'm reading. I'm in the last 20 pages of this. It's the best book in the world if you want to understand the South, and not from like the Lost Cosmos. South to America by Imani Perry. Excellent book. And I'm also reading. I just picked up Liz Pelly's Mood Machine about Spotify. And every musician, frankly, should read it. It comes from an excellent kind of analytic lens about musicians as workers and the cost of the tech industry. And I think it is really helpful. Like super, I have so many thoughts on it, but it's great. So I'm reading way too much right now.
I've been meaning to ask you, you seem like a guy that's probably read this book, if I mention it, man, but have you read Hammer and Hoe by Robin D.G. Kelly?
It's on my list.
Is it? Yeah. Okay. Cool.
The like other Southern kind of like labor history, it's more from like an anarchist perspective, that I love is Dixie Be Damned. it's an all-time like top book to me. Love it, love it, love it, love it.
I've got Kim Kelly's Fight Like Hell right now on my shelf, waiting to be read, and I'm still trying to crack open some of Thomas Hobbes's Leviathan. Trying to go back to some of that stuff, man. But I've been curious about like what you read and what your like radical bookshelf looks like and stuff like that too. So to hear that you're leading a Capital reading group, man, I would love to be part of that actually.
Come on with it. We just had our first meeting. We're not that far out. So
you guys aren't past like the linen chapters yet.
We're past. We're into money.
You're into money now.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we just held the pedal down. We can't get too bogged down in the
linen stuff there.
The iron stuff. I mean, I'm good.
Cool. I'm gonna dive back into my R.L. Stein, but anyway, before we go, we have one more question to ask you. It's a question we ask everybody. We call it our Almost Famous question. It's from the movie Almost Famous. Not sure if you remember or ever saw that movie, but the question is, it's the most simplest but most complex question because it's literally like less than 5 words, but the answers that we get are always, no matter what, poetic. So Nathan Evans Fox, what do you love about music?
I love that it makes my kid dance.
You just made you made me cry on my own show. So that was beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful. All right, Nathan, thank you so much for coming on. You're going to be playing our 2025 Corpus Christi Songwriters Festival, which is taking place February 14th through the 16th. You can get your tickets now at ccsongwriters.com. He'll be playing February 16th, correct? You'll be closing out the festival. So can't wait to have you there. Can't wait to see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks for coming on.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you, sir.
Bye. Thanks, y'all. Have a good one.
Who's gonna rebuild LA? The migrants, you're hell-bent on casting away. Once you've cut off your nose to spite your own face, who's gonna rebuild LA? Who's gonna farm all your crops?
As one reviewer once wrote, she is that unique that she stands out from the rest. So much truth in her vocal projection that you can feel the honesty in every single word she sings. Let's welcome Sarah Golden, our next guest. How are you doing?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Both Jules and I caught you at SWRFA this past year. That was my introduction to Sarah Golden. But for my cousin Derrick, who's our only listener, please tell us who you are.
My name is Sarah Golden. I'm a Scorpio. I like long walks on the beach. No, that's not true. I'm actually probably I have a touch of the OCD and I don't like mess and dirt. But I am a singer-songwriter, originally from Houston. I consider myself folk. I've been playing and kind of part of the Houston music scene since about 2002. I released an initial album called Truth, the cover shot of which is actually my first communion picture, which is me in a first communion dress. And in the background is this huge tagged spray painted wall with like a skull and an eyeball coming out. My dad is a photographer, and my mother left him to his own devices to do first communion shots and didn't get to see the pictures until they were developed. So that was an auspicious occasion, to say the least. So I have just kind of played and been kind of all over. I've participated in a couple of reality television shows over time. I was a New Folk finalist in 2002, and I've had the amazing opportunity to open for some really amazing artists that I look up to and could not form a cognitive sentence in front of. And I do distinctly recall when I was about 16 or 17, I went to the Houston Women's Festival. And I had performed I was in choir and stuff growing up, and I had performed in, school competitions and whatnot. But I didn't play an instrument, and I definitely didn't write songs or anything at the time. But when I went to this festival and I just saw all of these women, I think Susan Gibson was there that year, and there was just so much amazing talent. And me and a whole group of, 16-year-old girls were just, fangirling. And I was like, man, I want to play at this thing. And they were like, yeah, right? Like, and I'm like, no, for real. Like, I want to play at this thing. And so that year I wrote an album and I sent it, and I ended up on a side stage. And then my next goal was to play the main stage the next year. And I did. And I played alongside Susan Gibson and Ruthie Foster and Melissa Farrick and Terry Hendricks. And I made shirts because it was, and I had everybody's name on the back because it was important to showcase that I had also shared the stage with all of these awesome people. And that was kind of the impetus to my little musical career here. So it's been a fun adventure, and wrought with a lot of character building exercises, as I like to call them. But yeah, I don't know if that was 275 words or less.
I mean, that was definitely not good for Twitter, but it was good for us. Wait, Twitter doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
But you brought up Susan Gibson, and I just want to say the first time I ever thought of myself as like I could do songwriting and really focus on songwriting, I was 14. I was really into, at that point, well, I grew up listening to the Beatles and the Beach Boys, but at that point I was really into Green Day and other things like that. And then my dad took me to this, it was kind of an open mic night, but it was also radio shows where if you did well enough, you can get on the radio, like with your live performance. And Susan Gibson showed up and played, and everyone in the room was like, oh my God, this is Susan Gibson. And I had no idea who this was. But I kept hearing over and over again, because she wrote Wide Open Spaces, she's fine for the rest of her life. She's perfectly fine for the rest of her life because of this one song. And I was like, I can do this. But then,
okay, cool.
But then she blew me away. And like I remember afterwards, I went up, my dad forced me to go up to shake her hand, and I was like a shy 14-year-old kid. I couldn't shake her hand. But then fast forward to 2018, she was our first headliner for our festival. So it was a full circle moment. Yeah. But yeah, that's it.
To find out, she actually ends up being an amazing singer-songwriter all on her own.
Amazing singer-songwriter.
From the one super popular song, yeah.
Extremely nice person.
There was a story about Don McCann, I think his name is Don McCann, the guy who wrote American Pie. And they asked him, what does American Pie mean? And he was like, American Pie means I never have to work a day in my life again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm a songwriter. And
that's the only reason. I'm doing it for the money.
Yeah, that's why I make 60 cents a year from Spotify or whatever it is.
Wow, you get 60? Hold on. I'm going to write to my attorney.
But all right, so you saw these amazing people that first that you went to that festival, and then you were able to eventually headline it. Who are you now? What's your process as far as a songwriter, and has it changed since you first started?
Yeah, it's funny. At that point, when I first started, I was also coming to terms with my sexuality. I am a lesbian. In case anyone hasn't gotten a gander, it's fairly obvious. I was in a relationship, and my girlfriend at the time was going through some pretty tough stuff. And I remember being on an airplane, the first song I ever wrote, and we had just finished a phone call before I boarded this airplane, and kind of a line just kind of formulated itself. It's in my brain. I thought, oh, well, that would make like a good lyric. Again, not even being in a place of writing songs or ever having done that before. And then kind of another line trickled in, and it just kind of wrote itself. And I just grabbed a literal napkin back of it, and I wrote this song down, and I didn't end up changing anything about it. I just wrote this song just like it was, and it just kind of presented itself to me, actually. And that was the first song that I ever wrote. And I remember kind of when I got home, I thought, wow, this could be a thing. Like this seems like maybe like a thing. And I just pulled out a guitar again, I have no knowledge of, I don't read music. I really consider myself more of a vocalist who kind of meanders her way through guitar. But I remember whipping out the guitar for my parents and being like, "Hey guys, I wrote a song," and they're like, "Oh, okay, that's cute. Let's see what you got here." and then I played it for them, like, "Hey, wow, you actually did write a song. Like, that's a real song. This isn't like, kind of a Seussian kind of thing." So, I think my music writing has kind of morphed over my lifetime here. Now that I'm in that, sweet spot of midlife crisis. No, I'm kidding. That was previous. I'm in the post midlife crisis now. I think it started originally that "I love you, we're going to be together forever," and then it kind of turned into the "how could you," and then it turned into "how you like them apples," and then it kind of turned into kind of other bits and pieces of. It was mostly, I would say, it was typically all kind of relationship oriented. And candidly, I took a hiatus from music for about 8 years or so. And I'm kind of recently back. Within the last year, I'd say, I had a couple of really insistent songwriter, personal heroes and friends of mine who just wouldn't let me stop playing. And I have to say, I am truly grateful to those people for not just letting me throw this away. And I registered that a lot of things were happening in the world that I had a lot of feelings about. And so I'd say my 40-somethings music is far more political in nature. I think there's always been a bit of a political bend to my songs. And it's funny because I have a song I wrote from Swerfa that my prompt was write a song with one chord, and I thought, oh my God, this is going to be a disaster. But honestly, it ends up being one of my best songs. And I sent it to my parents, and they said, well, that's funny. There's like no gay reference in this one. And then they listened again. They're like, oh no, there it is. So, most of my songs have, some a little bit of a gay undertone, if you will. And so there's always been a political bend to some extent. But now I feel like the songs I am compelled in this moment in time to write are ferociously political. And I feel like I need to get those out while I still have the ability to do that, candidly. So that's where I'm coming from in 2024.
I asked you about because the topic of like in my mind, one of the conversations that's always going on, not between like multiple selves, but just as like a sort of monologue and sense of reasoning, and that I pick apart on is like how overtly political one is allowed to be within art before it just turns into a purely political statement, like if you can tell the lived experience of an oppressed person through a song with a verse and a chorus, right, then that's one thing versus like, being way too hammer on the nose sort of thing, Yeah. So I wonder if like, and sometimes you can just, you can be as vague as the very specific will allow. Like we just talked to Stephanie Sammons recently, and one of her lines that I pointed out was like, she just says like, Jesus saves us on a billboard, right? And it's like kind of sets the scenery, right? So like within your music and in your own, expertise as a writer, like how are you going about that kind of battle between being overt or being just shy of being overt, I suppose?
It's a fair question. And I'll say I have an extremely supportive wife who is wicked smart. And I think something that's interesting because she's not from the musical world. And so when I play these newer political songs, there is a piece of her that, listens from a multitude of perspectives, and we discuss it at length. Kind of, is this a finger pointing kind of song? Are we like wagging the finger at somebody here, or what? And we discuss. Well, sometimes art does that. Sometimes art makes people feel things, and it's not always happy things. And in the same breath, you know, I personally had an eye-opening conversation with an individual who belonged to a minority group who was making commentary about, in this particular example, white people. And this was also years ago. I feel like I have learned and grown significantly more since even this conversation. But when this conversation took place, my knee jerk was to say, hey, man, I'm super supportive. I am an advocate. I'm an ally. I'm at every parade. I'm making all the phone calls. I'm writing all the postcards. And this person kind of stepped in and said, hey, if you are not the person who is doing these offenses, this is not about you specifically. And it took a moment of introspective kind of retrospect to take a step back and say, why am I making this about me? Like, why do I feel compelled to be personally offended by this person's lived experience? And I feel that way in this moment as I'm writing things that are very pointed, you know, and might to some extent categorize or generalize. I feel like an important thing that I don't think everybody's had that same aha moment I've had, right? And I think there are people that may hear words and songs and say, well, that's not it. But at the end of the day, I think it goes back to the conversation of, well, if you're not one of those offenders, then this isn't about you. So I think it's worth taking a beat, you know, to consider, why am I offended by this? And then, you know, maybe do some further soul searching on that topic. And then maybe kind of learn, you know, the concept of other people's perspectives. One, I have a song called The Topical Tango, and it is one of the first songs I wrote kind of when I came back.
I was going to bring that one up. So.
Yeah, and it's pretty specific, and it calls people out, politicians specifically. But I feel like a lot of the words from that song are literally conversations I have with people on a regular basis, and just kind of how sad it is that now somehow in 2024 being empathetic is seen as a weakness, right, or a shortcoming. And, you know, calling it woke and like making it a bad word, like to see someone else's lived experience, even attempting to from their perspective. I am kind of in a place right now where I feel like it's important to, if that makes people uncomfortable, then sit through it and kind of sit through your discomfort and then maybe question why you're uncomfortable there. And if it is, you fall into a category of, in this particular instance, white guy, and you're like one of the good ones, then maybe do your part, because guys listen to guys, you know, statistically speaking. So if you don't want to be part of the, you know, problem, then go be part of the solution and maybe be more of an advocate instead of just an ally. So yes, to some extent, there is some finger wagging involved, because it's a wild world right now for women, for gender nonconforming people, for LGBTQ people. You know, I mean, I've lived in Texas my entire life, and my entire life, everyone has said, why are you in Texas? I mean, God, that is, talk about a state that doesn't want you there. And this is my home. And I have said, first off, like, what kind of privilege does a person have to be able to leave a state just because they're being oppressed? And then how many people are you leaving in the wake to defend themselves, maybe with no resources, right? And I'm also finding myself in a position where I'm maybe considering having to relocate myself, right? So it's tumultuous times, and I feel that my give a damn is kind of busted at this point. I really kind of feel like these are things that have to be said, and I feel like people can choose to listen to them. They can turn it off. Like, I don't really care, but
Yeah.
you know, it's more or less kind of a diary entry that is going out to the world. And it is an unnerving experience. And people do have feelings and opinions, and they share those. And so for a long time, a lot of my socials were private because of that, because I got a lot of keyboard warriors. But I've kind of recently decided to turn my socials back on, and just let it be.
I'll say that, like, it takes a certain amount of courage and willingness that borders on insanity, right? To stand up in front of an audience with an acoustic guitar. And if we're already at that point, you start to consider I don't know, I start to like think at times, I'm like, it's actually probably the responsibility of an artist, anyone that creates art, to be, as artists are, the canary in the coal mine. We're the ones that bring up these sort of crisis points in society when the cracks in the veneers start to become visible. And so insofar that, like, I mean, I've wondered like how you even begin to create music in the year 2025 or 24
right,
without being political. Like what's the point at that point? Because even isn't that saying about like in times of oppression, when you stand in neutrality, you side with the oppressor, sort of thing, And
right.
so I really admire the way that like artists. I mean, one person like Jason Isbell is the guy that kind of, for me, I was like, oh, okay, so it's possible to weave this sort of thread of like being, standing for the liberty and equality of your countrymen in such a way that it doesn't sacrifice anybody else's liberty or equality,
Right.
And yet you can still be in this genre and still, but there's a certain nuance to that. And part of it is having these political songs that, like, if you're going to write a good song and you abide by maybe the rules that like Ralph Murphy said, no whining, no preaching, no venting. Like, how do you do these things without like indicting the audience, or calling them out, and part of the way that I, just as a really practical way, as I just switch up our pronouns. Don't use you, just use we, or how do we, or they, so Jimmy,
but also for me, it's just like writing from a place of honesty. There shouldn't be, maybe a little bit, but not really finger wagging if it's coming from a place of honesty. You're just speaking your truth and what that means to you. And I think that's right. That brings people in more than anything else. But yeah, that being said, Jules, I do the same thing. I change the pronouns many times to all my songs. Because I'm tired of saying I or we or you.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, no. I don't know what you're talking about. No, never.
Yeah. Yeah. That train sailed long ago for me. So, I don't pretend to. I don't pretend to kind of even operate from a place like that. And I do. I have tried to like hyper analyze. I'm in the midst of writing a song right now, and it went, one very strongly directioned way at the onset. And I kind of dug my heels in, like, okay, this is what I'm doing. And as I listened to it over and over and over again, I was like, okay, I'm not trying to just like accuse people of anything. I'm trying to make an important point here. And if I accuse people and people get offended, then they will stop listening. So it's less about like, I want to be popular or please like me. And it's more about just listen to the whole song. Here's the whole message. And here's what I'm trying to convey. That's really the goal, I guess. If somebody likes it at the end, then groovy.
Yeah. Like, do you think, so like, I think we all kind of know that whenever a country political song lands and it's on the other end of the spectrum, when it's on like the far right, singing about, I don't know, Eagles and trucks and freedom and someone like a Lee Greenwood kind of thing, right? It gives us the ick. It's like, oh, dude, no, man. Like most of the time, like I am not like when Tried in a Small Town came out, that was like, I couldn't do it.
I did love the visceral response, though, from people from small towns who are like, I live in a small town. You don't. You don't even know what our community looks like. And we don't treat people like that. And that actually was wonderful.
Yeah, they were like, aren't you from like Akron, Ohio, bro?
Yeah,
like,
don't you live in a McMansion, man? Get out of here.
Yeah,
you don't even know.
But the question, do you think people on the other side, like when someone writes like a left sort of compassionate country song, feel like an ick?
Yeah.
And is that ick mainly just out of like compassion 100%. Or something? I don't even know, man. Maybe I just wonder if there's any way to do this without isolating half the people listening, Yeah.
I'll say to that point specifically, And this is why I think it's so important that everybody, I say everybody because everybody should have the right to share their feelings in song or what have you. But I think it's incredibly important right now, maybe more than ever, that progressive individuals go out there and spread the good news, as it were, because it has now been made completely acceptable. Like the troglodytes of the world who used to have boundaries and, well, you can't say that in public, or you can't do this because you're going to offend somebody. Now those people have just carte blanche to do whatever. And we are showcasing in this moment in whatever 5 days that even the worst offenders can have the highest position in office, right? And so we're really just teaching an entire generation that there's no recourse for any of this. And I feel like it's a really important time, and it's also a pretty scary time to stand up and say, I'm not going to tolerate that, right? And that's not acceptable, right? And that's not for everybody. It's funny, I am reminded of, I played the art car parade when I was, 17 years old. And I had a shaved head, and I, had a tank top on. I had like tattoos everywhere, and I was just little gay me. And I was playing this set, and there was a little crowd there, and there was a woman kind of at the back, and there was a little kid next to her. And if I had to assume, I would have assumed they were attached here. And maybe this lady was like in her late 50s, and she stayed for the entire set. And I saw her bopping along, and everybody was having fun. Okay, so the set's over, and I get off stage, and this woman comes over to me, and she's crying. And sincerely, my first thought is, oh my God, she lost her kid in this like crazy crowd, and like I need to run on stage and yell out like, hey, has anybody seen this child? But no, she says, hey, I just want you to know I'm 58 years old and I'm still not out. And seeing you, what are you, 17? I mean, you're out and you don't even care. Like, you are extremely confident in who you are. And the truth is, even if I put on a dress, even if I, were acted or tried to appropriate to, society's construct of gender norms, it would look forced, and I would look like a football player in a dress. Like, that's just how it would come across. So it's just easier for me to just be myself. And I have found that to be far more liberating than trying to conform to what society has dictated, completely unnecessarily. Long live the patriarchy. And I think about that moment a lot because this woman, who was older than I am now, was so moved to see a goofy little teenager, just singing love songs, and I feel like it's important. And I try to remember that. I try to kind of hone in on that in times where I'm doubting, man, am I doing this right? Should I be saying all this? And then, yes, hell yes, say this. But if not you, then who? And I feel like that's an important thing that also is very much kind of pressing on the back of my brain, just that sentiment of if not you, then who? And so, yeah, I mean, yes, to your earlier question, are there people who just automatically turn off when, some libtard, kind of commentary or song comes on? For sure. But I will also say I have played many a house concert for, oil and gas executives that I assure you are politically oppositional to me on all levels, who have absolutely loved the show. And there are times like that I feel that music really is kind of a universal language. And I'd like to try and mesh the lines, weave the lines a little bit, make them a little blurrier even, of like, this is just me enjoying you, entertaining me, like Dance Monkey kind of thing, versus this is me enjoying you, entertaining me, and also me kind of having a moment of considering, maybe I should rethink that stance that I have about that particular topic. So less about just, Shecky the Clown, and more about, I hope that while it is entertaining, and while I am there to, offer my, musical talents, as it were, to this particular crowd, I hope they also leave with some thought, and I hope they think about that, I guess that's the least, that's as much as I can hope for, I guess, at this point.
So what I love about this conversation is like it's everything that I've tried to communicate to anyone who's trying to write songs and really say something, you know, like it's funny when like, because I think we all know this person in our life where, you know, they want to show you a song, you assume it's going to be a deep song, they pull the song out, and then it's very shallow lyrics, right? It's like, why can't we just be free? I want you to be you. I can be me, or something. You know, like. Really
why are you singing my song? Why are you singing my song?
I'm scratching the notes from the song I was just writing called "Why Can't We Be Free?"
Yeah, the problem is that there's it's very hard to be self-aware if one is not interested or at least curious in the other, you know, and so. When you examine from a songwriter the other and you kind of resonate with the suffering of the world, you keep track of the news and you are socially conscious because you understand that you're only as free as the person beside you is allowed to be free, you know, and that your freedom is wrapped up in theirs. And so this entire, you know, way of looking at art, like I've tried to explain how like the difference between a writer who's just who's not going to get past that shallow, self-involved level of writing versus somebody who can write a song that reveals the listener to themselves is a fascination one must sort of cultivate with the other, you know, and as soon as you start doing that and you develop your sort of compassion muscle, which is a muscle that can be developed, right? You end up writing songs that are much more heart-tuggy, that are much more emotionally evocative, that are much more impactful, that your words have more weight, and your art and your music, you know, flows accordingly. But to hear someone taking, you know, that charge as an artist that seriously to say the things that you need to say in the times that we live in, you know, I'm just happy to hear someone speak to I don't know, to feel the seriousness towards it that you express, because we need more artists that are doing that sort of thing.
The truth is, it's not optional for me. I mean, everything right now is extremely impactful to my life and well-being, my liberties, my freedom in my home, in my life, in my relationship that literally has no impact on anybody else. And there are millions of people who are equally being impacted and will further be impacted in the coming months and years here. And the truth is, because it so directly affects me, because all of the, I mean, as an example, 600 plus pieces of anti-LGBTQ legislation have been presented in the last year. Okay. And if you aren't in that community, and if you're even as an ally, right, like it's not necessarily being shoved down your throat all day long. And I have this conversation with allies and with great individuals who have no idea that that's going on. Right. And so I try to educate in the places that I can, when I can, you know, do what you can with what you have. But it's funny because when I start rattling off lists of the attacks that are happening against my community, against women, against bodily autonomy, the trans fight right now, you know, I mean, it's so crazy. Every single person on earth, every single person in America should be concerned about the trans fight right now, because the minute trans people lose their ability to bodily autonomy, any and every person is next. So whether you want to be involved in this or not, you are, you know, and to your earlier statement, silence is complacency, you know, complacence at this point. And it really, this is a minute, tiny faction of human beings, again, doing no harm, but existing, who are being villainized. And it's very easy to make this tiny, harmless group a very scary thing when you have no knowledge and you have nothing but ignorance being, you know, shoved in one ear and out the other. The regurgitated commentary I hear on this topic alone is astonishing because it's all false. That's the thing. And I have data to back it up and say, oh, no, that's not real. And I can tell you why. But everybody doesn't, A, have that data, and B, take the time to have those conversations. And so it's just, it's wild. It's, to your point, I don't have the luxury of, just sitting silently, because I feel like this is my last ditch effort. I became a voter registrar for this last election. I wrote postcards, I block walked, I convinced people to vote. I talked people who weren't even I talked to women who had no interest in voting into voting. I made phone calls. I did everything that I could. I played at Get Out the Vote rallies. I did everything I could to try and educate the masses. And it kind of still feels like we fell short here. And so this kind of feels like my last tool in my tool belt is, well, okay, I will use whatever platform I have here to relay whatever I can to whoever is willing to listen, in hopes that somehow something positive comes from it, I guess is really what it boils down to.
And, going back to what you were saying a little while back about how people are like, why are you in Texas? It's like, well, the privilege that comes with just saying like, oh, well, I could just move to a different state perhaps, right? Or just evade the attacks on my community as an individual because I have certain privileges to leave to be able to evade all that. No, like I moved back to Texas in 2022, and part of the reason I was looking to move back here was because Texas is like the forefront of the battlefield for, trans rights, the rights of the undocumented, and women's bodily autonomy. Like top three, some of the most important, political issues of our day. Texas is the fascist little brother of the United States, with this little pride of position of being a country at one point that seceded from two different, countries in its history because it was waiting on slavery, they're trying to preserve slavery. So, it's wild to, when you start reading a little bit and you start looking for ways to convey some of these, more pointed examples in history, you try to like I got a song about coal miners that died in a mining accident, and, but you can't just, at least sometimes I do, but you can't just come out every set and say like, hey, the, worker protection laws are written in the blood of workers that came before you.
Right.
You can't just, but Woody Guthrie did, I suppose, right? Maybe we could all kind of do something as overt as that, Yeah. But yeah, I admire what you do. I admire the sort of, the way you feel like it's like there's no other option to do it too. That's how I explain it to people as well, that like, you must be not just an ally, but an accomplice, and you have to take this stuff up because it's your freedom that's wrapped up in everybody else's freedom as well. So
I do want to know, has that been something that you felt since the beginning? This call to action, if you will, throughout your entire career?
What's funny is I was actually outed in Catholic high school in 2001 when the disapproval rating for LGBTQ just in general was 80%. And over the years, there is a chart that shows basically the disapproval rate going down and the approval rate, public approval, if you will. Everyone, 10, 12 years later came to terms with the fact that they probably knew a member of the LGBTQ plus community at some point. I feel like it's been a weird ride because we did seem to be going in an upward trajectory, right? We were going into a position globally. I'd like to think, not everywhere, right? But at least nationally, that people started coming to, why do you even have to have a coming out? Why do you even have to tell people? Like, what is it even? And sure, great. Yeah. I didn't have a party or anything,
Right.
It wasn't as exciting a moment for me as, as it sounds. But there was a moment, like we started, marriage equality started hitting states a few at a time, and then it became federally recognized. There are literally still people today who don't understand that marriage is federally recognized, that marriage equality is across the board. So when I tell people, oh yeah, my wife and I went and got married in Las Vegas, they're like, oh, so then is it legal in Texas? I'm like, yeah, no, it's federally recognized. thing. And so, it felt like, oh, this is becoming more kind of the norm. And the truth is, in 2002, I had a prominent record label approach me and offer me a very handsome deal if I agreed to never cut my hair, and I had to wear dresses, and I could not talk about my personal life. And I was like, well, all my songs are about girls. And they're like, oh, we can change that. And then we'll make sure, like, in all of your, press junkets and stuff, no one will ask you questions about your personal life. And, like, just make your first $4 million and then you go be as gay as you want. And I felt, that would be such a disservice to my community, to myself. Like, I felt like I would end up miserable and probably dead. And also, so many people before me had gone through such horrific, so many, LGBTQ celebrities who have spoken to their times as being closeted and then being, coming out later after they were already famous. I remember hearing an Indigo Girls interview once, and because I was obsessed with the Indigo Girls, I've been obsessed with them since my sister introduced me to the 1200 Kirpies album when I was, 9. And I was like, I don't know what this is, but man, something is just so right. And there's one radio interview they did, and some guy says, so, what's it like being gay, being a gay artist? And Amy Ray is like, oh, are we gay? It's so crazy. I feel like there have been times where it was becoming more kind of the norm, and so I declined that opportunity with that record label. And then a few years later, I got a very similar conversation from another record company that initially was like, we love everything about you. Don't change anything. And this was when I also had a shaved head and a labrae piercing, and I was extremely in your face, really just coming to kind of figure out who I was and, how I wanted to present myself to the world. And they offered me the same exact situation. It was like, okay, well, here's this deal. I mean, it was literally millions of dollars if I just shut down who I really am. And it was so disheartening because it sincerely felt like nobody really cared what was coming out. They only cared what I looked like and whether or not I was marketable as I was. And it was sad because I thought, when the second record label came out, things were on this upward trajectory. And I thought, okay, man, now is the time for you guys to have a young lesbian, in your face, singer. Let's do this. Let's do this together. And then they came out with kind of their offer. And I was like, oh man, no, not again. So, I went into kind of it doesn't matter. I'm just going to kind of play local gigs and I'll just kind of do this thing on the side. And funnily enough, then that was when I went and did America's Got Talent, and I made it to the top 100. And we got to Vegas, and there were 2 lines of people on this 17-hour day. And you could see 2 country guys, 2 27 kid, groups, 2 breakdancing groups, 2 beatboxers, 2 blah, blah, blah. And after 17 hours, I buddied up with the producer there, and I was like, hey, so I see 2 of everybody here. And they're like, uh-huh. And I was like, so I see them we're all being cut today. I'm just kind of curious, where's the other me? And they were like, yeah, you've been a big point of contention. We've had a lot of meetings about you. And I'm like, oh, really? And they said, yes. And we've come to the conclusion that if someone that looks like Susan Boyle can make it, maybe someone that looks like you can make it. And I'm like, what? Oh my God. So yeah, that was a thanks, no thanks. And then we're in line and these little girls in front of me are like, okay, it's us, we're going to make it. And I'm telling these 9-year-olds, I'm like, hey guys, I'm sorry, I don't want to burst your bubble, but I have a sneaking suspicion because I'm in your line, we're probably not going to make it. And they're like, she doesn't know. No, she doesn't know. And then sure enough, our line does not make it. And they throw a camera in my face and like, so, and I was like, well, I just feel like it's a bummer that America's, not ready for, I don't even know how horrible this is. But I can't just be who I am. And so they're like, no, we're not going to put that on. So that was fine because I didn't have to actually do all of that online and on TV. But subsequent to that, a lot of people had reached out to me about The Voice, and I had watched the first season, and they had 2 LGBTQ people in season 1, and I was digging it. And then everybody was kind of pushing me. If you don't go submit your own information for season 2, I'm going to submit it. And I'm like, don't do that. And I really had kind of just become disheartened with everything. And I thought this is all a fruitless effort. And it turned out that they were very cool. They were exceptionally cool. And I made it to ultimately fast forwarding made it to the top 30 people out of 300,000 folks who auditioned in that year. And it was funny because part of, they wanted to showcase my story about not, these record labels offering me if only I would change basically my appearance and everything about myself. And so after I'd already made it on the show, the producers were like, okay, we want to ask you a question. And I was like, okay, yeah, what's up? And they said, okay, so in season 1, I don't know if you saw it. Yes, I saw it. And they said, well, we did it a couple times where like the audience plays along. And then, so you guys, they don't see your face until the chairs turn around. And I said, oh yeah, I remember I saw that. I'm fine with that. And so they did that. And the internet kind of blew up. And it was kind of a funny response in hindsight because literally people were like, good God, NBC. I mean, I was expecting to see a burn victim. It's just a lesbian. I mean, what is your problem here? And so then they called me and they're like, hey, just checking in on you. And I'm like, I mean, I'm fine. Are you guys okay? They're like, yeah, we made a mistake here. We shouldn't have done it like that. That was on us. And you know what? So, but it's funny because, to answer your question, I haven't felt like I had to. I haven't, I mean, I wrote a song before marriage equality was legal in 2014 about how I couldn't marry the person that I loved, and it didn't matter that we had this longstanding relationship. It didn't matter that, all of that was a thing. It just mattered that, we needed to probably more so focus on separating church and state, but I digress. And then marriage equality happened. So I'm like, oh, yay, back to like love songs. And here we are, like we've done a complete 180 in the world. So I think it's a matter of the current environment that has led me to feel an absolute compulsion, if not a calling, to do anything I can to at least go kicking and screaming. I make a lot of jokes about when I'm in my, gender traitor internment camp, I'll make sure to, send you a postcard or whatever. And it's so wild how many people, because I really have done my best to try and distance myself from folks who are diametrically opposed to me. I don't need to like add the toxicity, especially in social media. But the people who seem to sneak through the cracks end up being other musicians, which I find amazing. Because I don't know how, I know those people aren't making the amounts of money that will benefit from tax breaks. So I'm not quite sure what they're getting out of all of this, but it's wild having conversations with those people because they're like, are you going to apologize when everything you're saying doesn't come true? And I make jokes like, yeah, sure. I tell you what, if I have Wi-Fi in my internment camp, I will totally send you an attaboy. I'll let you know that you were right and I was wrong. That's all I can do at this point is make jokes because shit's real and it is happening and I don't have control of my own body right now. And so I don't feel like I have a whole lot of options but to speak my truth and say it as loudly and try and be as nice enough about it to get people to listen for long enough to hear what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But you can't please everybody.
And I will say, just sort of as a legal disclaimer, that the Corpus Christi Songwriters are a 501c3 not-for-profit, and so as such, we are not permitted by law to tell you how to vote, and we would never do such a thing.
Yeah.
And that's not what this conversation is. This conversation is simply touching upon that the oppression that comes down through governmental policy is acutely felt by certain members of certain communities, more so than others, right? And so hopefully what songs can do and what they should do at their most effective and usefulness, I think, is like convince someone to give a shit about the other. Like I think of songs like I don't know, songs like Don't Take the Girl, like that old country song where like I'm like, Oh my God, there's in like the last verse or something where it's like he's getting robbed at gunpoint and he's like, just take the wallet, take whatever, your keys to my car, but don't take, and the way that elicits such a like, oh, as a listener, you're like, oh man, but yet country listeners are like ready to crucify like Tyler Childers after they loved him one minute when he wrote a song about a gay coal miner, or had a video with a coal miner that dies of black lung. And so like, what it is that songs, lyrics, poetry, the arts, it's nothing without a curiosity in the other. And it's not until one understands that the ways that others are made to suffer on this planet are also ways that your own freedom is stamped upon, limited, the way that your liberties are infringed upon. Like your liberties are tied to everybody else's liberties. So, if Sarah can't marry the person that she loves, or if other people in society cannot decide to live their lives in such a way that, self-actualizes them as best as they possibly can within their own set of possibilities, then all of our freedoms are affected. And so, I mean, I'm not trying to preach here. I'm just simply saying that, like, there are musicians who are actively riffing and writing on these emancipatory sort of topics, and we need more lyrics of substance having to do with this sort of subject matter. This is the stuff that I really dig into, man. Like, how does one say these sort of deep philosophical things, that speak to the human condition in such a way that it lands like a really effectual lyric? Like, how is that possible? How do you do that?
Yeah.
I mean, these truths are things that songwriters have been writing about since the beginning of time, right?
Right.
But it's
changing.
It's strange when you have people saying, just shut up and sing, when that's literally what songwriters have been doing since the beginning of time. They write these songs that have something to say. So why just shut up and sing when this is something coming from your heart, from your truth, from our truths. So we should never be afraid to never shy away from that.
I like that you just changed your to R just so you could be more socially acceptable there. I'm kidding.
You're welcome. No, I have no idea. But
it's peace to the oppressor, or peace to the oppressed is the lack of oppression, whereas peace to the oppressor is a lack of resistance.
Yeah.
Amen. Okay. We have gone for nearly an hour with you, and it was supposed to only be a 30-minute conversation.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No.
If we go any further,
literally,
I'm gonna start quoting stuff out of the Black radical tradition over here with like.
Let's move on from that. But but I do want to know. I have two more questions for you, and they're similar but different. One, on your songwriting epitaph, what would you want it to say?
Man, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know. I feel like that's a hard one because
That's a hell of a question, Jimmy. I didn't know you were going to ask something like that.
Yeah, I thought Jules was supposed to be the wise old sage. No, here's the deal. I'm sure everybody feels some level of this, and I'm sure I know many women feel imposter syndrome. And it's funny, I would never think that I was worthy of even putting a musical epitaph together, to even have some kind of commentary, like, that summed it all up, candidly speaking. I don't think I'm, that deep to be able to say, this will be remembered forever because, but I think that's a tough question for not even, just for me specifically. I won't even put buckets. I won't even make buckets of people. I'll just say, I think that's a tough question because I feel like I'm in a really crazy place right now where it feels like I'm coming to the end of an era of a life that I felt a real familiarity with, that I had grown into, that I had a level of comfort. And being being LGBTQ, being married, like I don't just get to go in every parking lot, every store, every restaurant and hold my wife's hand. It's not a thing that I don't get to just put my arm around my wife when I'm in public without, being keenly aware of my surroundings, because there's crazies out there, and I think it's the same way kind of with music. I feel like a lot of LGBTQ people spend a lot of their life having to kind of do this double take to figure out, like, is this a safe place? Can I be me here? And I feel like we were all kind of coming to this comfortable place where, yeah, you can be you, go be whoever you are, let your little freak flag fly, as it were. And now it's going away, right? And now we are just being called freaks, right? And it's not like an embracing of the situation. We're just kind of going back, decades, and life is quickly changing back to a time when it was not groovy, and so it's hard to answer that question, because on the one hand, I feel like there's a lot still to be said, and I hope that I have the opportunity to say it. And on the other hand, there's, an immense fear of this anticipatory grief, is what I've been told it's called.
Anticipatory grief.
Okay. Yeah, the existence of kind of where we are right now, the coming to terms with where we are right now, and the unknown of just kind of how precocious the situation may become. And the variety of ways in which it could go amiss quickly. So I feel I really mean it when I'm sarcastic and I joke, but I really do mean it when I say, like, hey, I'm going to put on a show while I still can, because I worry that there might be a time that I'm not allowed to say my piece.
Right.
And so, yeah, you can maybe edit that whole chunk out, because I don't have a good answer to your question.
No, that was good. I really liked anticipatory grief. That stuck with me very much so.
Well, I mean, we're headed down. We're staring down the barrel at another 4 years. Trump 2.0 at this point, and we're a few days out from inauguration right now as we're recording this, and so to that end, it's like part of. Like there is a moment, I think, in everyone's life where one has a political awakening, if you ever reach that point, and I know my point was very, I feel like I awoke to politics when Trump walked down the stairs and said what he said about Mexicans, because I felt like America has always been a country with its gun pointed at a certain section of society, and all my life to that point had mostly been Muslims, and now I felt they were pointing at Mexican Americans and immigrants and the undocumented and stuff like that. So I felt like it was a personal threat to my family, and so it would be a little while after that, after I started to awaken to politics, that I realized that, it is like a moral regret on my end that it necessitated a threat to someone that I hold dear to bring me into an awakening. It had to happen to me personally, because that's the kind of stuff that we always get mad at Republicans about like, they don't care until it happens to them, sort of thing, but it had to have like a personal thing happen to me in order to awaken to that, in order to, look at my music. And then it sort of become like a little bit like I resented the fact that, like, because I feel like I am here to write music, and then because there is injustice to such a degree that, and the world is sort of, in a way, just sort of immune to it, and it doesn't sway the world in a way, right? Perhaps one of the things I was not, sort of anticipating was the way that life goes on in its everydayness during the onset of fascism, perhaps, the way that the way a bus route may still be kept in a area of a city that was bombed, even though you're going to work with windows blown out, sort of thing. So in that respect, like, there was a while when I would sit down to write songs and I would feel a tremendous amount of guilt around, like, it takes a certain amount of resources, a roof over your head, food, security, all of these things in order to be able to channel the things that we do. And there is somebody at that precise moment that doesn't have those exact things that you're using to write this song with, you know? So I started to look at songwriting itself without the aspect of the political. What meaningfulness was there to be found within that without carrying forward the responsibility of an artist? And so all those things, like we could have just had this conversation in the last 10 minutes, I suppose, like, because it's like, this is what I sense out of you, which I really admire too, to meet someone who is channeling that and writing that and writing their truth as it accords with, you know, something that's political, but it's also like, when you examine it from the perspective of like, these are real threats. This is, you know, realpolitik. And this is what you contend with on a daily basis. Yeah.
I would love to, as I told that, you know, one musician dude, are you going to apologize? I would absolutely love to be wrong. And honestly, I don't even want to have to focus on politics. That's not my jam.
Yeah.
It is just the barrage of things coming at me as a member of a lot of groups is something that I just can't ignore, one. And two, I think, you know, what you're saying here, just, you know, like I said before, I have plenty of friends, plenty of allies who just have no idea because it doesn't directly impact them. Even though they love me as a friend, you know, I've got a gay friend. Hey, good for you, man. But also, here's what's happening to us. So, like, feel free to jump in anytime because we're a minority for a reason, right? Like, we're never going to have this, like, uprising and we'll finally, you know, get our due. We'll get our votes out there or whatever. Even if we all voted, it's a minority for a reason, right? And that's why it takes advocates, you know. It takes the people in the other groups to actually say, hey, guys, hold on. What about these little people over here? We got to bring those guys with us because, like, we've got stuff. And there's even that same concept in the LGBTQ community, you know, all these years of fighting for rights. And it's like trying to get, you know, hey guys, look, let us just get our rights and then we'll bring you guys with us once we get here. But that's not how it works either. We're all in this together. Literally, we are all in this together. And I think something that really became something that's just been eye-opening to watch over the last 8-ish years has really just been the onslaught of atrocities. It's not just like things that would have, you know, 15 years ago been, holy cow, that is nuts. I can't believe. Now it's just like, oh, another thing. And it's become so commonplace that it's like we just turn it off. You know, I mean, people just have become indifferent. And that's why I think there's an indifference to, you know, even participating in voting and all of that. I feel like people, I just would rather just stay out of politics. And that is also a luxury that a lot of people don't have. And some people don't even register that is a stance in and of itself, you know. It's wild. It is, to your point, not a thing that you become involved in until you are directly impacted. You know, I don't know many people who are fighting the good fight who are, you know, super affluent, completely protected, completely unencumbered by and or unaffected by anything going on, unless you're like, well, my niece, my daughter, my, you know, sister, because somebody you love.
Yeah. The ones that have been doing the
right
work
now
are the ones that have PTSD from doing the work as well.
Right.
You know, I mean, I feel like there's a whole lot of like, oh dearism going on with like the media presentation of stuff where there's like, it's like, oh dear, this catastrophe happened. And we're supposed to say, oh dear, in the sense that there's, you know, villains with that, or there's the victims without a villain, and there's, you know, the harmed without a harmer, and there's, you know, oh, this is all, you know, we're just suspected to like watch the news, chip in a few dollars, and then the whole cycle moves to the next catastrophe, you know, and it's Odierism once again, you know, so I just, you know, there's a saying that I've read, which is something like, if you want me to write about the birds, the bombs being dropped overhead must stop. Like the planes overhead have to stop in order for me to hear the birds, for me to write about nature, you know? And yeah, so I mean, case in point, like this is a songwriting, you know, podcast, and we're three songwriters sitting around talking about the politics that happen to come through in our writing, you know, and even if we went out to, like, you know, if we rented a cabin in the Joshua, you know, in the desert or the Joshua trees and stuff, right, as some artists who to get away from things, I think you would find that, like, in those moments when we're trying to conjure up the most meaningful words we can say, they're always attached to something political, you know.
Sure.
And some of us, you know, we just have to kind of reckon with, like, you know, like Jason Isbell says something like, I'm not the kind of artist that's going to release a record where you're going to put that record on as you're driving to the beach for the day. It just may not be what we do. And that's okay.
Yeah. Having to come to that conclusion, trying not to make everything like I joke I was raised by the most sarcastic man on earth, and I try to insert snark, so it's not just aggression, but it's like aggressive humor, I guess. But I try to insert snark even in songs, as just to try and make even a heavy topic as lighthearted as I can get it, you know, and that's mostly probably for my own mental well-being and less even for the listener. But if it keeps somebody's attention long enough to at least have heard the message, then cool. That's at least the hope. Even cooler if they want to try and listen to it one more time, you know, and see what maybe they missed. Not to say I'm like so deep or pathetic or what have you, but I don't know. I feel like, again, if it hasn't directly impacted you, it's just not top of mind. And I feel like we were coming to a place in society where it's like, hey, I should be considerate of my neighbor, you know, of their lived experience. And now that it feels like it's going away. And so the only way to fight that is to continue doing the work and continue spreading the message out there for people who don't have the luxury to spread it. And, you know, I use my 7.5 minutes of fame here and the little tiny platform that I have to convey in hopes that one person changes, you know, their thought process. And maybe that one person tells their two friends and they tell their two friends, and 606 degrees of separation later, you know, we've made a tiny little ripple effect.
Wonderful. All right. We have now officially made it 1 hour. So let's talk about your performance at the Corpus Christi Songwriters Festival. It'll be your first. What do you hope to get out of the festival?
I'm really excited about it. The lineup looks awesome. I'm really excited to hear everybody. And candidly, living in Houston my whole life, I've never been to Corpus Christi. So I'm interested in seeing what the hubbub is.
Seeing the Gulf of Mexico from a different angle. You know, it's.
Yeah. Well, it's still called the Gulf of Mexico. Yes.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Right.
I am looking forward to it, and I feel like it's going to be a really fun event. So I can't wait.
That's right. I can't wait to have you here. We can't wait to have you here. You'll be playing, I believe it is Sunday afternoon, correct?
Sunday. Mm-hmm.
It's Sunday afternoon, and you can get your tickets now at ccsongwriters.com. And then next week, if you tune in, I'd say this like it's a radio show, but for anyone that's listening to this week by week, next week we're actually going to have a code that we're going to say during the show, and if you hear that code, you can type it in and get I believe it's 25 or 30% off the whole VIP ticket price. So definitely do that. Okay, I've done my housekeeping. We have one more question to ask you. We call it the almost famous question. We ask this to everybody that comes on, and it's really simple. Sarah Golden, what do you love about music?
I feel an emotional attachment to music. I listen to music all day long, and I love how music can really cathartically help with a variety of feelings, and also can convey and even dictate moods, you know. As toxic as Spotify is, I do love the Wrapped that comes at the end of the year. I do listen to Spotify. I'm sorry, everybody. If it makes anybody feel any better, I listen to everybody's songs like 1,000 times. So like you're getting at least $1 from me for my 1,000, streams. but I'm shocked at how, like, the amount of time I spent listening to music, but it is really a part of me. And it's such an important part of my life that even, and I'm sure other musicians do this, I know they do, but if there's a negative thing happening, if there's a conversation that takes a turn or whatever, I will turn music off for that conversation because I don't want that music to tie to this, like, negative moment. It's just that, I feel like it's that serious. And I think people can form memories and tie a lot to music emotionally and otherwise. I think it has saved my life. And I know there are songs and, artists who have definitely saved other people's lives. So, I think it's a very powerful, it could be, I guess I'll say it's a very powerful tool, but it's more than that. And I feel like it's like a spiritual kind of level of kind of a way to connect everybody, no matter what their walk of life may be. And that's really the coolest thing. When I sit in a room with people and we're all from varying backgrounds and I can get somebody's toe to tap, it's like, I feel like I won. Not to be competitive, but it's like, I got him. Yeah, I knew I could get you, guy that would never talk to me if you saw me on the street. But right now, I have your attention, and not only do I have your attention, but you're like in it. We're in it together, and so that's nice. I like how it can really connect people.
Wonderful. Well, Sarah, it's been an amazing conversation with you. I loved every second of it. Jules.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation. It's great to be able to speak to an artist who is, like I said, kind of grappling with the same kind of stuff that if you are at all socially conscious, a lot of artists I think are finding it hard to sit down and write a damn love song at this point with so much things going on in the world, and one has to kind of isolate themselves from
rude,
those.
Honestly,
yeah,
right. Song right now.
It feels a little rude. Yeah, a little like not reading the room.
Yeah, man. Yeah, learn to read a room.
Yeah, like I know. For me, like I had to start a podcast about politics at one point in order to like get to a point where I could sit back down and write songs to feel like I had done some of the work that
I did my part.
Like some part of it, like it's work that like what is it? You're not obligated to complete it, but neither are you free to abandon it. So, but just thank you for just an awesome conversation today, and I just
want to say thank you for your honesty in your music and just who you are. I truly appreciate you.
Yeah,
and we can't wait to have you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I can't wait to have you at the Corpus Christi Songwriters Festival. We're just a couple of weeks out now, so we'll see you soon here in a different view of the current Gulf of Mexico.
Gulf of America, right? Yeah. Sorry.
Yes, I look forward to seeing you by the Gulf of whatever.
There you go. All right. Until next time. Thank you.
Bye.
Good to see you.
Thank you, guys.
That was this week's episode of Corpus Christi Songwriters Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Jimmy.
I'm Jules.
Tune in next week for Rachel Laven and Andrew Delaney. And be sure to go to ccsongwriters.com and get your tickets now to the 2025 Corpus Christi Songwriters Festival.
When's the festival, Jimmy? When is it?
It's February 14th through the 16th. It's coming up.
Through the 16th. You mean it's on Valentine's Day?
Anti-Valentine's Day.
Anti-Valentine's Day.
That's right. If you hate love, go to the never mind. But either way, ccsongwriters.com, get your tickets. We'll talk to you next week.
See you next week. If you hate love. All right.
Shut up.